Alright, welcome back to the shop. I'm working on the Mueller toolbox, and I've got a new orbital sander. I think this will be pretty neat. I'm looking forward to trying this out today. And before, that video is going to be, I don't know how long till I get it out there. But anyway, one of the guys I've been following, Ben Mall, was asking me about the pneumatic tools, and I really haven't spent a lot of time discussing those, and I figure this gives me an opportunity to introduce this tool, and we'll see this being used a little bit later in this video, but then you'll see it again in time-lapse when I'm doing the toolbox. But anyway, I like the pneumatic stuff. It just, because I have an air compressor, a big air compressor, it works good. I've got I think it's a 1959 Gardner Denver ACD4, which I got out of the scrapyard. It works perfectly. I put a motor on it, cleaned it up. I did that before I started making YouTube videos. I think I have some pictures long ago of just in a tool montage video that I did. But anyway, having a big air compressor is good, and the rule of thumb that makes the most sense to me is that for every horsepower, for every single horsepower you have, you'll be able to generate 3 cubic feet per minute at about 90 psi. And that 3 cubic feet per minute at 90 psi sort of gives you a baseline on how many horsepower you're going to need to run a certain tool. So if you have something that needs 15 cubic feet per minute, you're going to need a 5 horsepower air compressor, and some tools use astronomical amounts. There's capacity issues that go along with that. Like my tank is an 80-gallon tank, and there's advantages to having 120-gallon tanks and 50-gallon tanks and all these other things. But anyway, the storage is not quite as important as the amount of power, amount of air that your air compressor can pump, and that ability to pump air diminishes as the volume, as the pressure gets higher. So the curve will sort of, the gains get lower, the compressor works slower as the pressure builds up. So to maintain that 90 psi, it's really working hard. And if you're buying an air compressor, look at the designation on the motor. It might say 5 horsepower SPL. And that SPL is a designation for air compressors, which means that's probably like a 3.5 horsepower motor that's designed to put out about the same amount of amps as a 5 horsepower motor, but only for a short period of time when it's going from, let's say, 80 to 100 psi in the tank. Those compressors are usually significantly cheaper than an industrial type thing. I've never owned an Ingersoll Rand or anything like that. I see a lot of them around, but anyway, the thing that you want to think about is no matter what the marketing says, no matter what the labels are, that if you're not going to get 1 horsepower, you're not going to get any more than 3 cubic feet per minute at 90 psi per horsepower. That's just physics. So anyway, let me get out some of my air tools and show you what I got. Okay, so you can have all the horsepower in the world, and it's not going to do you anything if you can't get it to the ground, so to speak. When you're compressing air, when you're moving that air as a fluid, you're going to need to be able to get it into the tool. And one of the things that you're going to see when you go to Harbor Freight is a bunch of cheap air fittings and stuff. And it's very tempting, and they're more than sufficient for a lot of applications for just blowing off things and whatnot, not moving a lot of air or running a small tool. But if you look at this is a Milton V-type, and I think it's no, I'm sorry, it's a Milton M-style. The small one is a Milton M-style. Milton make really good adapters. The Milton is a little bit more expensive, but they're far superior. They don't leak. They're just really great. But oh geez, I'm sorry. But anyway, they have the M style, and I believe the other one's a V style. I'll put a notation up if I'm wrong about that. But what you can see there is the effective orifice size there. these are both 1/4" adapters, but I think this will let through 17 or 18 or something cubic feet per second at 90 psi, but this will let through like 43 or something like that. It's just it's a order of magnitude difference, or maybe it's 73. I forget. I'll try to look up those numbers. But anyway, these bigger Milton style, I think the V style, like I said, are great when you really need to move a lot of air. And when you're moving a lot of air, there's certain types of tools, like a small die grinder, where you don't really need the big orifice size. However, an impact gun that uses a lot of air, so I've got the bigger nozzle there. I also had a 3/8 impact that wasn't hitting quite as hard as I wanted to, so I put the big nozzle on there. And when you're really having some problems, this is my 3/4" Ingersoll Rand. This thing really uses a lot of air. It hits so hard with this big nozzle on there. I had gone out and spent a lot of money with 3/8 adapters and stuff to try to get some big airflow to it, to these bigger tools. However, the oh my God, what am I doing? You can see that the 3/8 fitting, which is far more expensive, 3 or 4 times more expensive, isn't that much bigger than the V style. So anyway, you can save a lot of money, you get a lot of gains if you have quality fitting. So people dismiss a lot of that. They try to crank the pressure up on their machines and all that other stuff. But these are restrictions. You want to cut as many restrictions as you can out of your system, and that'll make your tools work more effectively. My system only pumps up to 110 psi, and it runs perfectly. I have 1/2" copper lines run through the shop with direct connections where I screw the fitting right into the copper. So there's very minimal choke points in the system. So anyway, I like the air tools. They're very handy to have, and you can get a lot out of a smaller, lower pressure compressor without having the restrictions in the line. So when you see the DeWalt's 175 psi machines and things like that, you don't need that. The tools are designed to operate at 90 psi at the tool. Just make sure that the line, the hose getting from the compressor to the tool has as few impediments as possible. And the other thing about having tools that are effective is having tools that you'll use. If you're not using the tools, what's the point in having them? And my biggest gripe is about changing the tools on die grinders. Die grinders are just a pain in the butt because they require little wrenches. And I've got a bunch of specialty tools that need specialty wrenches. And what I've done is take a sash chain and took my welder and welded together the various sizes that my tools take. This fits my angle grinders. This fits the arbor for the cutoff wheels. This is the big side for the chuck. This is the small side for the chuck. And I've got them all welded together on one thing, and this makes it not impossible to lose, but much harder to lose. So that's a handy thing. I really enjoy having that. But to the ends of using tools, I don't like changing the bits on these. And these things are so cheap nowadays that I just tend to buy more die grinders. So this has a carbide burr on it with the blunt end. That's a handy tool. But I don't want to switch it over every time I want to put a roll lock disc on something. So I bought another one of these. I think are $10 a piece. Now I can put a roll lock disc on this. The wire brushes, you know, you need these all the time, so you don't want to change that out. But you need different types of wire brushes, so you know you want to have another one. And you know, sometimes the long wire brushes aren't as good as the short wire brushes, so you want to have one of those. And sometimes you want to be worried about slinging metal off into everything, so this is an epoxy encapsulated wire brush. That's pretty neat, and you can't always fit your paws into there, so this is an extended reach wire wheel. The other burr that I had was a flat tip. This is a round tip. I use this one quite a bit. These tools are small. They're not nearly as powerful as some of my bigger bigger die grinders. However, you don't always need the monstrous ones. These aren't much more expensive. This is a Harbor Freight, $10 or $12 with the, and you know, you get those 20% coupons. You can get these things for next to nothing. But sometimes you just need a little one, and they don't use as much air. So, so anyway, this is the larger with the roll lock disc on the end. The cutoff wheels. This has a nice guard on it, so I keep one with a guard. I have one that doesn't have a guard on it. This is a 4-inch wheel. This is sort of a Franken cutoff wheel, if you will, but this works so good. That is such a handy tool. I do a lot of sanding. This has a Velcro hook and loop type system with a bunch of different sanding pads. This really puts a nice finish on the tools. I've also started using these Scotch-Brite wheels. I'm not a huge fan of these so far. There are certain applications when these are handy, but they're definitely not what I'd hoped. But I still find myself using them, and I use them in different. There's 40, 60, 80 grits. So instead of having to change these things out all the time as I go through, I just keep them chucked up. I look for the scratch and dents on Amazon, and I've got this Ampro. This was probably like an $80 pneumatic tool. This is a really neat design. I'm really happy with this tool. It uses a lot of air. As you can see, I got the big style fitting in here. It's the most powerful one I have, but it's a little quieter. It's I'm just super happy to have it. But it was a scratch and dent. I think I got it for $30 or something like that instead of the normal $80. These composite ones, the composite handle ones, these were a cheap scratch and dent thing on Amazon. This is, I think, Chicago Pneumatic. Or Campbell Hausfield. Yeah, it's the Campbell Hausfield. I've been pretty happy with these. They also have the option, occasionally you'll find them where they come with an 1/8 inch arbor or 1/8 inch collet, and the 1/8 inch collet is great because the tools are a lot cheaper, and when you're really doing fine work, it's just great. And the 90-degree tools I find are a little bit easier to more comfortable to work with, in my opinion. A big carbide burr. This is a Cobalt. This has held up pretty good. I've beat the crap out of this tool for a long time. So I've got nothing bad to say about Cobalt. This has really served me well. I think at some point I had to get in there and fix something. But anyway, it wasn't something that was irreparable. So happy with that. And of course, you know, you don't want to, even though these roll lock discs are easily interchangeable, you know, you always want to have, it's sometimes easier to just go from a 40 grit to a 60 grit to an 80 grit instead of having to have a bunch of used discs laying around. So anyway, this is my sort of rundown of pneumatic tools that are my go-to tools. I also have a pneumatic drill. These drills are nice because, and this is reversible, I can modulate the speed on this. It's very powerful considering the form factor. It's a little bit noisy, but I do enjoy using it. It's nice. It's not as convenient as my cordless Makitas, but you know, it still gets used. I was doing some upholstery for the girlfriend. Stapler. This is just the handiest tool. The old school staplers are for the birds. These are super cheap. They're fun to use. One of my absolute, I think, just best tools in the world is a long barrel chisel. These pneumatic chisels will absolutely move the world. They're so powerful. Ingersoll Rand makes some really nice ones. I took a chance on this one. This is Illinois Industries, whatever this is. This one, anything long barrel, you know, and you got enough air behind it, usually going to hit pretty hard. And this is great for when you've got stuck bearings and things like that. For my removing the bushings out of my Ford, the front end for the twin I-beam F-150 that I got, indispensable tool. So anyway, that's sort of the overview of my pneumatic tools, and I don't think that I would enjoy working in the shop as much as I do without having the ability to blow stuff off and just go to all these different tools. I mean, I don't know of a single, if you were to buy electric die grinders, they're hundreds of dollars a piece. And anyway, this is the way I prefer to do it. I know it probably looks a little crazy, but it's very functional for me. I enjoy having them, And, you know, as you can see, I get some work done with it. So, anyway, I'm going to clean up the bench now and move on to using my sander, not in this video, but be in a different video. Maybe I'll post in a little bit of, just a couple seconds of time-lapse of this working, and then keep making some forward progress on my other projects and getting content up on the channel. So anyway, thank you for watching, thank you for subscribing, and if you have an opportunity to get a big air compressor, by all means, you should do it. And if you, even if you see one that needs work, don't be intimidated by it. They're simple machines. I've rebuilt probably 8 or 10 of them. You know, it's almost fun at some level. So anyway, there's some aspects of it that can be dangerous. So you just want to be aware of things. If you see one that has rust holes in it, or somebody's put self-tappers or something in the air tank, stay away from that stuff. You don't want to kill yourself. There's a lot of potential energy stored in those tanks. So make sure the tanks are good. And then also, before I end this, I just want to say one thing. If you have a shop, and you're like me, you prefer for it to be somewhat quiet. So a tendency for people tend to build housings and enclosures and stuff to hide the air compressor, because they'll buy a cheap one that's loud. Never buy an oil-free one, in my opinion. But they will buy an oil-free one or whatever, and then they'll spend all this extra money building an enclosure, and that'll muffle the noise a little bit. But then somebody will say, oh, well, you know, I'm just going to shove this gas can over here. I'm going to shove this thing of mineral spirits over here. I'm going to shove this can of solvent over here. I'm going to rest something over by this compressor. And I saw an instance where they had a little building, a little like 3 foot by 3 foot building or enclosure that somebody started storing paint cans in and gas cans and things like that. And the fumes from that, the compressor intook those fumes, and then there was some sort of a spark in the system, and it leveled the building. I mean, leveled an entire cinder block building. And I read the OSHA report on it, and this was just me doing research on compressors, and all they could identify was a wet spot that they presumed was the mechanic that was in there on the job at the time. So when these things blow up, you know, they really blow up. So make sure that they're in a well-ventilated area. They're not going to be compressing gas fumes and turn it into a giant bomb. So anyway, just be safe around these things. And wear safety goggles when you're working on any of this stuff. All these things are designed to turn at 20,000 RPMs. They are really slinging these out at high speed. So, I mean, I have polycarbonate glasses on all the time, and even then, that's not quite enough. So I'll put on a full face shield. So, anyway, that'll conclude the pneumatic little montage here. And like I said, patch in a little video from this.